Hey, welcome back to Burnt Wood Workshop. In today's video, we're going to go over... No, just kidding. I got rid of the long-haired guy that intros the wrong videos. Today, we're going to cover different ways to cut really small trim pieces. I was doing a job, and I was cutting real small quarter round, and I cut the piece, and it went flying out. And it was a white piece, landed out in the snow, and I couldn't find it. I cut another one. It went flying, went out in the snow. So I said, there's got to be a better way. So I come up with a solution. And here's a quick idea, and that's what we're going to cover in this video. So in this video, I'm going to show two different ways to cut really small trim like this. One of them is with a miter box that I made. I'll show how to make a miter box like this if you want to make one. And at the end, I'll show how to do these pieces with your miter saw. I'll make a jig and show how you can cut these small pieces on your miter saw and not lose them. And there's a little secret to that makes it real easy. So after I lost a couple of trim pieces out in snow, I decided to make a miter box because I was in a hurry and didn't have time to order one, buy one. Home Depot is about 45 minutes from here, and that's a pain in the neck to have to run out and get something. So I made a quick one, and I made it out of pine, and I ran a bunch of cuts, and on the last couple cuts it broke, but I found that I could keep the blade kind of pushed up against here while I cut, and I was able to finish the job. And I decided this was really handy, so I made a maple one. So we're going to go over making that and a special little trick when you're using it to make the pieces stay in place while you're cutting them. So when I made the miter box, I said, well, geez, I don't even have to use the laser for this job. And I said, well, you got it, you might as well use it. So I put a keep your fingers out of it, out of this area or you'll lose them. And I just put a little engraving on the front. And on the first one I did the bottom flat. There's a piece of trim in there. This one I made a little shoulder on the front so that when you're cutting, you can slide it right up to your bench and it'll hold it in place. But we'll show how to use this, and I'll show you some things that I would do differently if I did it again, but this one works and I'm going to keep it. So to make this miter box, I basically have a 1x4. This is actually not a 1x6. This is 4.5. Just I wanted it a little bit smaller for less blade throw. And this one here is another 1x4. I cut them to 16 inches long, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to countersink, screw and glue this piece to here so that the screws are below the cutting base. And we'll get this glued up and assembled, and then we'll cut our slots in it. So to lay out the miter box, basically I made it 16 inches, and on the first one I just went 8 for centered, but when I did that, it came right in the line here. Now, I made these below the line, but if by chance you did cut too deep or something, if you got carried away, I would offset these on either side of that. So basically, instead of 8, I might go 7 and 9. And then an inch in worked really well for here. So that was the critical ones, and then whatever you want to put in there, you can, but I would skip the center one. I would go an inch in, and then you could probably just go 4. Okay, so once you got your mark set, I use a combination square set for 3/8, and I just basically mark my holes. I'm marking with one of these. I got a whole set of these. It was a pretty nice little set. I could put a link in the Amazon. I get a small commission if you order them through my link, and it helps pay for this channel, and I'd really appreciate that. And I'll also show the countersink I use. I used to use a countersink like this, but the new one works a lot nicer. And when you're countersinking, this little rig right here works great. Basically just set your collar depth, and it drills in enough to recess the holes close to flush, or you could go deeper so you could countersink and put a plug in. And that was a handy little set I got off Amazon. I can put the link to that in the comments if you'd like to get one like this. So it comes in a nice little case with different size bits for different screw heads. So it comes with the set that's that, and that's got 4 more sets and another collar and the Allen wrench and an extra set screw. It's a real nice set. Works great. And now we're going to clamp this up, glue this onto here, and then we'll go to the miter saw. And then I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to use regular sheetrock screws. And people say, oh my God, regular sheetrock screws. But you know what? I built stuff 20 years ago that are still working perfectly fine with regular sheetrock screws. So they work. So the initial miter box I made out of pine. So I used just regular sheetrock screws. But it broke, so we made it again. Well, I made it again in maple. And with maple, you can't use sheetrock screws because they'll snap off. And with maple, you want to pre-drill before you put your screws in. And you want to use construction screws or something that's a little stronger than a sheetrock screw. So that's all screwed in, and that's our back. We'll put the front on it, and then we'll take it to the miter saw and we'll cut our slots on this one. My little 12-volt DeWalt. She's not quite as powerful as the other ones, but if you want 3 drills running at once, it's handy. And it's nice for working in cabinets when you're in tight spaces. Okay, so there's our one side. Now on the other side, I did it the same size because I'm going to be doing this on the floor, but I could do it so that this one, instead of being a 1x4, could be a 1x5 or just enough to have a lip hanging down on the bottom like that so that you can push it up against your bench and clamp it down. So that's another possibility. But for this one here, I want it for doing trim work when I'm putting down quarter round around a baseboard. So I really want this to just sit flat on the floor. And everything on this side is going to be the same as the other. We're just going to slap a little glue on there. And we'll go to my saw. Okay, get that even up nice. Okay, so there's our basic miter box. Now we're going to go out to the miter saw, and we're going to cut our angle cuts in this. So what I did on this was I laid out my cross cut, since it's 16 inches, at 8 inches. And then I put my square on here. And I want my angle cuts not to run off the center, because I want to be able to line up and see where the marks are. And this is an experiment. And I also don't want this cut to be too close together so that when I'm pushing, I don't have a weak spot and have the board break on me. So what I did was I had used this for 3/8. I just brought this in. Yes, I brought my square in 3/8 right here like that with this. And that marks my 45 this way. And then I just did the exact same thing the other way. And we're going to go out on the miter saw and we're going to cut our slots. So in order to do these cuts, what you want to do is, if your saw, like mine, has a lock stop, right here, if I flip this lever in or out, the saw will either go all the way down. If I flip the lever out, I can turn this knob and set it so that it stops at 3/4 of an inch. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our miter box. We've got that set stop at 3/4 of an inch, and we are going to basically and I didn't go all the way through. I could have put a spacer, but we can just And that's our first cut. Then we're going to turn it to 45. And then it probably wouldn't hurt to check if the 45 is a perfect 45. But I have faith in my saw, so we're going to just go for it. And it hit both lines perfect, which also tells me that the 45 is pretty accurate. Okay, so here's our miter box with the cuts made. Got our handy dandy miter saw. And we're just going to finish this cut the rest of the way down with this. Which is much slower than the miter saw, but there we are. That's one way. And then we're just going to finish it up this way. So there's our miter box. And I'm going to make an accessory for it that's going to make it even more helpful. And this little piece right here is going to be our handy accessory. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the saw, and turn it to 45. At 45. So now on our table saw, we've got our bevel set for 45 degrees. And we're going to take that block and we're just going to cut the 45 degrees off of it. After we plug it back in, after we change the throat. Okay, so we've cut the 45 degrees off of the one side, on this side of the bevel. Now we're going to do the exact same thing going the other way. So now we've got a 45 here, and we've got two 45s, one on each side of that 45. And that's our sneaky little trick. So when you're doing trim work and you're making a piece like this, and say it's just a little bit too long, or you've just got this piece and you want to make just a small cut off of it, that's where this comes in great. You've got your little, this is our special little secret weapon. You take that, we're going to slide that right down onto that piece. And we're going to clamp it good. And you want to make sure this is not in the way of the blade. And then I have two different saws. I have this one here, which has a real fine tooth. It cuts slow, but it cuts nice and clean. And then I have this one that has a little more aggressive tooth. It cuts a little rougher, but it cuts a lot faster. But we're going to do a real clean cut with this one. So we're going to do this cut, and I'm going to block this a little bit, but we'll see what results in a second here. As you can see, after about 8 days, you can cut through this piece. All right, starting right now. And that is the speed difference between cutting with those two saws. And as you can see, it's a little bit rougher cut maybe. See, it's a little bit rougher, but it's a lot faster. So by using these in either direction, putting your bevel down, you can cut your small pieces with these. Now say you wanted to cut something like this, piece of square stock, and you're doing the same basic idea. With this, the only difference is you're going to use your flat side. So we're going to set this in clamp it. Okay, there's our cut with the aggressive blade. Now we're going to make this three and a quarter inches. No, we'll go 3.5. Well, 3.5. So our next cut is going to be 3.5 coming back the other way. Okay, so here is our cut with that saw on this end. And that's the cut on that end. Not too far off. Sides, we'll glue those up and see what we look like. So here's a little box we made with that miter saw. I had one corner that was a little bit off. And one of the things you want to keep in mind is if you do cut this with the miter saw, the blade has a little bit of slop. So when you want to kind of hold the blade up against this on both sides. I had the blade pulled against that and that threw the cut off. So, well, here, if I can show you on top here, you can see it a little better this way. If you keep the blade tight up against here and here when you cut, that'll work better. And if you don't, as long as you don't do this, where you're pulling it like this, you want to push it like this as you're cutting. To resolve that, if I was going to do this again, I would take and I would cut part way down with the saw, and then I would finish it with this saw so the blade is tight in these slots. But I'm not remaking this. This is going to stay like it is. It works great. If I can make a little box like that, that precise, I'm pretty happy. And all the little pieces we cut. So next we're going to go over how to make this handy with a miter saw. Okay, so to set this up, what you're going to want is 2 boards cut a bit long with the bevel on it, and then you're going to set your saw down and you're going to slide this up to the blade, and then you're going to back it off just a touch. And then if your fence has holes in the back, which most do, you're going to screw that fence to your blade. And then she touches it a tiny bit, which you can just clean up. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. And you're going to lock that one in with the bevel going obviously the other way up against the blade, so that we've basically made a 0 clearance throat like on a table saw, which, as you can see, she's nice and free. Okay, so we've got our fence piece attached. We've got our cut for both directions. Now, say we want to cut this piece. All right, so we just want to cut the end off of this with a bevel. So you're going to take this, you're going to take your angle piece this way, and you clamp that on here. Keep that up against the fence on this side. All right, so we've got this. We got this side clamped up nice for this direction. Actually, let's not waste so much. Let's push that back a little bit. All right, so, all right. See, our piece clamped up in this direction. Now, we've got to get it close to the blade on this direction. We don't want to hit the blade. We just want it close. Okay, so we've got this side clamped, and we've got this side clamped going the other way so that the saw doesn't hit it. And we're ready to cut our little piece. So let's okay, and there's our piece. Didn't go anywhere. Now, say we wanted to cut this back the other way. Now, I want to cut it this way. And we're going to cut this off this way. We're going to take the fence handsaw down, just so we know right where our piece is going to go. That going down. And there are our pieces. So by having this set up like this, and just these two little beveled pieces, you can keep everything from flying all over the place and always get your small cuts. And you can do the same thing with straight pieces. If you were trying to cut a piece of small flat stock like this with a miter saw, you would just use the flat sides of these, using your same angles to line them up. Except this will tip. Same with the miter saw, this will tip. So what you want to do is you want to have another scrap of this to just set above, just to kind of keep it from tipping. But that is that for the miter saw. So if you like the video, give a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. I'm doing all kinds of different things. This video, basically the real secret is these two pieces here that you can clamp your piece down with. The fence idea works great. Miter box you could pick up on Amazon for 18, 20 bucks or more. This was just fun to make, and of course I had to bling it up a little bit. But I'll put a link in the comments to my little countersink kit. If you buy it through mine, it doesn't cost you anything, but it makes me a couple of bucks pays to keep these videos going. I got more coming. So basically, if you're doing little tiny pieces, and a lot of them, miter box is probably the safest. But with these clamped down with the regular miter saw, you can kind of keep things in place so you don't lose them in the woods. And basically, it's just a pair of these and a couple speed clamps. I got a lot of other ideas. I'll share them as I get them done. Thanks for watching.